Alright guys, today I'm going to do a list of top 5 vampire comics. And surprisingly, there aren't a bunch of vampire comics I would usually suggest because there's just not that many good ones. Or there's not that many that really strike my fancy, if you want to say. Now the thing is, honestly, in the manga universe, which is comics, but manga, there's a lot more vampire comics I actually enjoy. However, the reason I'm not going to add manga is multiple reasons. One, that manga on YouTube can get strikes which take down channels, and I am not going to risk that on my channel that's been here for over 15 years. So let's talk about comics, because there are some that I really do want to mention, and most of these are the main focus of vampires, but there's one that has a side character or co-character, because one series is basically 3 main characters. One is a vampire, so a lot of focus is on him, and he is a vampire, and it does tie into the main story, but it's not a vampire story, if you want to say, but I'm still going to count it. But anyway, let's jump into 5 comics that you can read right now if you love vampires. Alright, so let's start with 30 Days a Night. Now, this is probably one of the oldest ones on my list, next to another one, and I really do enjoy this comic. I think the biggest plus to this comic is the fact that it's very, very moody. It's very cloudy. It's very hard to see. It really makes you feel like you're in this snow-like environment with these vampires that come out to eat you. So basically, if you don't know this, it became a movie, which the movie is pretty good too. I don't think either are like amazing, but they're fun vampire stories. And basically what it is this town in, I believe, Alaska, or one of those colder areas with a lot of snow, gets attacked by vampires at night because there's no sun out, and while these vampires are vicious and they fucking terrorize this small town and start killing people. So it works really well because it's something different. You really don't get that in a lot of vampire stories, this isolated cold feeling that it goes for. And I also just really like the fact that it moves at a really good pace. That's probably the best part about it. I was never bored. So while I didn't get fully invested in every character, and I didn't think they tried too many new things with the vampire lore or mythos, I did enjoy the fact that it moved quickly, it was bloody, it was nasty, and you could pretty much read this in like one sitting. But it's worth reading because it did kind of define the vampire comics back in the day when there weren't many in the very early 2000s. So These Savage Shores is one of the newer ones that came out just recently, and it's by Ram V. And Ram V is definitely an up-and-coming big name. I know a lot of people do enjoy his detective comics, but this to me is his defining moment as a comic writer. I picked this up really not knowing much, and it's almost a history lesson within a vampire story. So I do want to advise this is much slower paced than most of the other comics on here, but at the same time, it really is worth reading just because the story definitely delivers. It basically, you mix folklore from like East Indian folklore, and then you kind of have Dracula type of creature where it's this thing that's a myth, bigger than anything you can think of, that's in the shadows at all times, and it all kind of accumulates. It's like a slow boil to the end where it becomes pretty fucked up. I really like this book. I mean, this is definitely different. I'm a pretty big history buff, so I think that's why I enjoyed this so much. I love to learn about history. I love to read about it, so a lot of this gives you that, but at the same time, you have this slow burn feeling that something horrible is going to happen by the end. And well, let's just say that the vampires in this deliver. They are monstrosities, and in the best way possible. And the art is absolutely wonderful. I have not really read many things by Sumit Kumar, I believe that's how you say his name. But wow, what a really cool, different style. I think the colorist really helped here as well. Sorry, I'm not going to pronounce the name because I'm terrible, but the last name is a Stone. And together they make this kind of, I don't know how to say it, but it's like color washed environments and look, but it looks historic and accurate at the same time, but also fantasy. It's a crazy mix. So as you can probably see, I'm posting photos of it from the book. It is a really cool atmosphere and design overall, on top of a great story. Yeah, this one is a super big surprise. It was actually one of my favorite books of the year. It came out, which I believe was 2019 when I put it on my list, and it really is worth reading right away. Alright, so that one I was talking about that I'm kind of cheating with is Preacher. So Preacher isn't really designed to be the main character as the vampire, and it's not a vampire story per se. However, Cassidy, one of the main characters in the book, is absolutely a vampire and absolutely contributes big storylines to the overall plot itself. I do think that it's cheating a little bit that it's not a focus of a vampire story, but if you like vampires and you like a main character being in a very long series, it's probably the longest one on here, then you should check this out. Cassidy has easily become one of my favorite characters, one of my favorite vampire characters ever. He's also a piece of shit. So, I'm not going to spoil what he does, but it's not nice. He's not a good person. But at the same time, he is really relatable in all his flaws. On top of that, he is super entertaining. So as a character himself, to be that good, to be that memorable, to stand out within this story that's mostly focused on religion, I have to say that he did an excellent job, and he is a vampire, and he definitely shows himself, and his backstory is all vampire, and it is all types of fucked up. Alright, the newest one on this list is Little Monsters. Now, Jeff Lemire makes characters I care about. That's his main focus. And while Little Monsters doesn't really reinvent the wheel of vampires or mythos of the vampires, or really start a new story, this one you've probably seen at least storylines from other stories out there. I didn't give a shit because I liked the character so much. I do think the first half is a lot stronger than the second half, and that seems to kind of be Jeff Lemire's way. But I will say that I really just enjoyed this story in general for the excellent pacing. I think it moves at a brisk pace that makes it so exciting to read about a bunch of these kids who aren't kids, they're vampires because, well, they can live for almost ever, and they kind of have to be in this apocalyptic type world, but they find out that they've been lied to. So a lot of twists and turns. A lot of it you could probably see or guess, but it still is worth it just for the characters alone. Some really shocking deaths and some really good, well, he's on that side, she's on this side, look at this perspective, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to spoil it, but it is good. It's only 2 volumes, probably be collected in the deluxe edition down the line. And yeah, from the storyline to the overall art, together they make a really compelling, interesting story that I couldn't get enough of when I was reading it. So go pick it up. It's only 2 volumes, but it's definitely worth reading if you like more human characters in your vampire story. Alright, and probably the most well-known vampire story, American Vampire, is the one that's on the top of my list for all comics. This is pretty much between Batman New 52 and American Vampire. This is what made me a Scott Snyder fan. I also think when Scott Snyder has the freedom to do what he likes, most of the times he's going to give you a really good story, especially when it's not so much superhero stuff as of recent. Now, the original American Vampire is an older comic that came out in the 2010, I believe, around there, 2009, 2010, and ran for quite a long time. It ran from like that to 2015, and then took a really long break because Scott Snyder was writing so much superhero stuff, and he came back in 2020, and I think it finished up in 2021, and this is a really long-running series. It gives Preacher a run for its money in terms of issue count, but it is really good. I will say that the fact that you kind of jump all over the place with different time periods and characters can be a bit jarring for people, but the characters that they do supply, the characters that you do get, it really does make it worth reading. On top of that, the fact that the first story takes place in 1925 in LA, like an aspiring actress who, you know, kind of falls to, unfortunately, events that happen with a vampire get really brutal and dark, but it's the actual time period that makes it so different than everything else that I've read on this list so far. A lot of what I read is either modern time or way back in the past, so this was a nice kind of in between. And I've got to say, I love the art here. I cannot say your last name, Raphael. I'm so sorry, but I'm going to put a bunch of the covers with their names on it. But Raphael, your art, I know you're not watching this, but if you ever did, your art is extraordinary. I love the way that the feel of it feels realistic, but still has that kind of like little bit of cartoony feel to the overall look. But the bloodiness of it all, the deaths, the killing, absolutely phenomenal. Also just a horror feel, like the eyes red and the shots in the dark, all of that works very well. The art is extraordinary in this series, if you ask me. On top of all that, the characters are really great. You got excellent characters. I love the kid. I love Pearl Jones. She's amazing. One of the best female characters I've ever seen written by a male, because I actually loved the way that she felt like a character and not just, I don't know, a prop for all these other characters. Skinner, absolutely one of the most evil son of a bitches I've ever read in a comic. I fucking hate him, but I also love him because he's so good. He's not as high as Griffith, but he's up there. I hate him. So yeah, the characters are great, the art is great, the story is really good, and while not every single storyline pays off in the end, most of it does. And I have to say that the beginning, the first, I'd say like 25 issues, are absolutely some of the best comics, not vampire comics, best comics I've ever read. Vampire comics, hands down, this is the best that I've ever read. And that is my list. You know, there are a lot of comics out there maybe I haven't read. There's some that I didn't like Dracula motherfucker. I didn't like that at all. But I would love to see your list. Maybe there's some comics I haven't read yet that I want to read. Want to read. There's also some comics I enjoy but didn't quite make the list, like Bloodstained Teeth. I think that's a pretty fun vampire comic, but it didn't quite get there. And Dracula, I only read the first issue, enjoyed it, but didn't read enough to get this on the list. But I would love to see you guys put a list below, even if it's just 1 or 2 comics that you love that have vampires in it. List them. Let me see. Maybe I read it, maybe I haven't, and now I want to read it. But I hope you guys enjoyed this list. If you did, as always, do me a favor, hit the like button. That means that you like it. I know that you want more content like this. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed. I got tons of more nerdy stuff coming out, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed, and have a wonderful day, and go read some comics.